Well, hello and welcome to A Reason for Hope. We have this question that's asked very often among internet and social circles regarding the topic of tattoos. Now, there's usually one passage above all others that they would go to show that passages in Scripture would say this is a negative action, this is a sinful action, even.
Yeah.
Where would that be found?
Yeah, a lot of people really freak out when they see people in church with sleeves or with tattoos, and they honestly believe that it's something that dishonors God. And when you ask them, well, can you show me chapter and verse? A lot of times they'll point to Leviticus chapter 19, where it says in verse 27, "You shall not shave around the sides of your head, nor shall you disfigure the edges of your beard. You shall not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor tattoo any marks on you. I am the Lord." Most of the time, they don't give you those lead-in verses. They just launch right into the "You shall not tattoo any marks on you." But those lead-in verses, and even the ones that follow it, are really important to understand, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Noting that, first of all, this is in the book of Leviticus pertaining to the Levites. It was speaking to Israel in the 14th century BC. And also noting that doesn't dismiss the moral law, but it does ask for context. Where was Israel walking into geographically? Well, they were
They're going to
walking.
they were going to Canaan.
And how
Yep.
did the Canaanites treat tattoos and markings and cutting themselves?
Well, once again, all these things were associated with the worship of pagan gods. In fact, we were talking before we went on the air about the very next passages involve even child prostitution in terms of worshiping pagan gods.
Which not only is worship of Ashtoreth, idolatry, but also just outright moral indecency. You shouldn't be putting your kids in that kind of position.
So the tattooing that's mentioned there has that pagan overtone. In other words, if someone is going to get a pagan deity tattooed on them, then I think that's a very bad idea scripturally.
But also note as well, there is a way to get a tattoo and not be sinning. In fact, there are examples in Scripture elsewhere where the writing of words or pictures or meanings on one's flesh does not hold negative connotations. Not only does Jesus say in Revelation chapter 3 that among those whom he has chosen, among those who he calls as his bride, he will write on them his new name. And likewise in Revelation 19, when the Lord returns, there's going to be a name written not only on his robe but on his thigh, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So
Right.
you have to ask not only what's being written, but why. And I think that's what ultimately this question is narrowing down to, is not should you get tattoos? Well, I guess that is the question, but why are you getting a tattoo?
Well, obviously it's not mandatory, but on the other side of the coin, when you ask yourself, okay, am I going to get a tattoo? Why am I going to get a tattoo? When I was at the University of Arizona, there were a number of us who had a Bible study we got going in a very non-Christian fraternity atmosphere, and some of the guys really wanted to make a stand for Christ, and so a bunch of them decided one night they were going to go out and they were going to get a fish tattooed on their ankle. So when they were walking around in shorts, if they saw that fish, it would remind them of their commitment to Christ and the fact that they were going to stand strong and be there for each other as brothers in the Lord. Now, I didn't do that because basically I'm a chicken. I've heard tattooing is kind of painful, and I just didn't want to do it. But I couldn't find anything wrong scripturally with someone wanting to do that to be a mark of standing strong in your walk with God and to support one another in your walk with God. As you said, Sean, the big issue isn't what, but why. If we're just doing it as a passing fad or because we want to look cool, I think those are very sub-Christian motivations.
But on the other hand as well, if we are going to go by Colossians 3 verse 17, whatever you do in word or deed, do it heartily as unto the Lord. If you're going to get a tattoo, if that is on your mind, and if that is something that you can do to further and demonstrate your relationship with God, then you're no more sinning than the person who doesn't. Have your own convictions, have your own motives, but most importantly, make sure that they're pointing you to Jesus, not away from him.
Yeah.
And note, the neutral ground as well is dangerous because our fallen nature can even mess up non-sinful things.
Yeah, just when all else fails, fall back on what you know. Romans chapter 12 and verse 1, Paul said, "I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service of worship." If your decision on tattooing is filtered through that passage, I don't think you're going to go wrong. I'm Scott Richards with Sean Richards. This is A Reason for Hope.